Okay, so Yachimo greetings, Yedase, everyone. We thank you for tuning in. We wanted to do this live on who is the Great Mother because, of course, there's so many people talking about the Great Mother, Divine Feminine, a number of different things. They'll say the term the universe speaks to you, and when the universe says this, the universe doesn't understand this, and using all these kinds of, figurative language and so forth. But who is actually the Great Mother? And we can demonstrate that cosmologically, textually, and so forth. So, and for those who are unaware, I'm Odwirafo, Kwesi Ranehmbata Akan, Odwirafo of Akwamuman Amaruka Etifimu, the Akwamu Nation in North America within Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, Afuraitkaitnut people in the Western Hemisphere. I've published to date 31 books on various aspects of Afuraitkaitnut, African ancestral religion, culture, nation building, restoration, and so forth. We talk about anthropology, linguistics, cosmology. I'm also the founder of Hoodoo, the Hearth Shrine of Akan, ancestral religion in North America, a traditional diviner in the Hoodoo religion. So we're going to get into all of that. We've also produced a film, an award-winning film, Amarukafo Adibisa, African American Ancestral Divination, that is available on our site. As a matter of fact, let's just post up something really quickly while some more people are coming in. So some of you have seen, we posted this just last week. We started a podcast called Hoodoo Cast, podcast for authentic Hoodoo, which is Akan ancestral religion in North America. We have our first episode up. We traveled to New Orleans, myself and Voodoo Queen Galinda Laveau. We did a 3-hour podcast. That was the first episode. So we will have weekly podcasts. I'll be going to different cities, connecting with people in the Hoodoo tradition, which is Akan ancestral religion in North America. And of course, as we show in our book, Hoodoo People, Akan ancestral religion comes directly from ancient Khanit, ancient Nubia, taken from ancient Nubia to West Afuraitkaitnut to the Akan civilization. And then some of us were taken from those regions and forced into the Western Hemisphere. So there's a direct continuum of ancestral religious practice from ancient Khanit, Nubia to ancient Kamit through West Afuraitkaitnut, West Africa into North America. So we'll be getting into that. So, all right. Okay, so people are able to get in now, so we're going to go ahead and get into our topic. All right, so who is the Great Mother? And we show this, this sculpture, some of these sculptures that you find in Southern Europe and so forth, whether it's in France or they found in Germany or Italy and so forth, some of them 30,000 years old, 20,000 years old, 15,000 years old and so forth. When our people migrated from northern Afuraitkaitnut, North Africa, into Southern Europe, into the regions of France and so forth, and all across Southern Europe from France, Portugal, Spain, all the way across into the Near East and into India and so forth, and Australia and so forth, we carried our culture with us. When you look at some will say, well, they have the oldest religious practices. Actually, in Botswana, the oldest evidence of ritual practice is the sacred sanctuary and shrine of the great serpent or snake and so forth. That goes back over 70,000 years. So our people migrated up into Southern Europe, from North Afuraitkaitnut. This is why you find such sculptures. And when you look at the headdress, you'll see that's in traditional Afuraitkaitnut headdress. You'll see that in East Afuraitkaitnut amongst the Himba people and a number of different groups, various Nilotic groups and so forth, very popular. And of course, you see that headdress, that hairstyle in ancient Khanit and Kamit as well. So, but then we also have the image here of the Great Mother. Now, when people talk about the Great Mother, we want to show that the Great Mother is the female divinity Aminette. So let's look at some information about aminette. Now, this is the Great Mother Aminette. Hold on one second. All right. Now, many people are unaware of who Aminette is. She is the Great Mother of creation. Just like you have the Great Father of creation, who is Amen, you have the Great Mother of creation, who is Aminette. The pedigree of Aminette is what we want to deal with, all of her descendants and the different female divinities that are sometimes erroneously referred to as the Great Mother. So first you have Aminette, the Great Mother, and of course, Amen is the Great Father. And Amen and Aminette together comprise the two halves of the Great Divine Whole, which is the Supreme Being. When we look at the earliest religious texts yet unearthed in the world, the Meru text, the so-called pyramid text, there are no religious compositions anywhere in the world older than the pyramid text, the Meru text. So that includes the so-called Near East and India and everywhere else. When you look at the oldest religious compositions, you will find Amen and Aminette together in the oldest religious texts. So, but then you also look at a late period text, you'll find Amen and Aminette together as well. So let's look at, quickly, we're going to switch over. We're going to switch over to the pyramid texts themselves, and we're going to check that out. Now, this is a transcription of utterance 446 in the pyramid text. And when you look at the text, hold on a second. What you'll find in the the third line here is Amen, Henna, Aminette. Now, let's look at how that's translated in the pyramid text. So that's a transcription, but let's look at the pyramid text itself. And you can go to pyramid text online. They have images, for example, of the pyramid of Unas, the king Unas, the Ensu Unas, and so forth. They have the English transliteration, but they also have the actual images of the text itself. So let's switch over to that. Now, when you see the particular text and it says right here, that's Amen, Henna, Aminette, right in that particular column. And as a matter of fact, let me show that in a better light. We pulled out that particular column just so you can see the actual text. So we just saw it, transcribed. But now we want to show it isolated. So in the first column here, you see Amen and Aminette. You see the reed, you see the drop board, you see the wavy line, and you have the wavy line and the twisted flax and the forearm. That's Amen, Henna. Then once again, the reed, the drop board, and the wavy line and the loaf of bread for tea. Amen, Henna, Aminette. So that's the direct, piece. Now we're going to flip over to the translation so you can see what it actually is saying. And of course, when we compare the languages of the Akan people, Yoruba people, Igbo people, Fang, and so forth, we can properly translate these terms because we're speaking the same ancestral language. They're directly descendant genetically. So we have insight into these translations that Europeans don't have. Now, so we said 446. So it says, your bread of eternity, or your sustenance of eternity, is yours, O Nu, together with Nunet. So that's Nun and Nunet. And we're going to get into who they actually are. And then the text says, you two sources of the deities, the goddesses and gods who protect the deities in their shade or in their shadow. Your bread of eternity is yours. And today, Egyptologists spell Amen. They'll use the J or the A sound because they utilize J as A or Ya. So they'll say Yamen and so forth because they don't know the full pronunciation. So when they spell JMN, it's really AMN. Your bread of eternity is yours. Amen, together with aminette. You two sources of the deities who protect the deities in their shadow or shade. Now, so that's simply, evidence of the most ancient text anywhere in the world. Amen and Aminette are together. The Great Mother and Great Father together. There wasn't a time when there was just Amen. There was never a time when there was just Aminette. There's Amen and Aminette together as two halves of the great divine whole. Now, we're going to go to a late period text from the Temple of Heb, so-called Hybis, in the Western Oasis, established by Darius. So when the Persians invaded Kemet, so you had the Assyrians invade about 2,600 years ago. After them, the Persians around 2,500 years ago. Then you had the Greeks. Then you had the Romans. And then, of course, hundreds of years later, you had the Arabs and so forth, who are still in control now. But at the time that the Persians invaded, and then later the Greeks, that change over from the Persians to the Greeks, the Persians were still trying to preserve these different temples because they were trying to be in control and trying to attach themselves to, the ancient religion, which of course they could never do. But once you get to the Greeks and the Romans, they start changing the, images of the deities to white and so forth, and changing names and giving Greek names and so forth, and totally corrupting everything. But when you look at this Temple of Heb, or so-called Hybis, in the Western desert in Southwest Kemet, one of the most well-preserved temples, and it's in the late period, then we get some more detailed information. So let's look at that. We just want to show a continuity of cosmology. So this is a text, an article, which became a book dealing with the Temple of Heb. They were talking about Amen and Aminette and so forth. Now, if you look, it says, the upper register of the hypostyle hall M consists of scenes in which Darius I presents offerings to deities and shrines, most of them visiting Hybis, which is the Greek version of Heb. Notable among these scenes is the so-called liturgical hymn to men, addressed here to Amen Ra, Lord of Heb, misnomered Hybis, and Aminette within Heb or Hybis. Now, let's go down to the specific text we want to look at. Okay, so we want to look at this cosmology. So they're talking about the sacred animal totems and so forth of the divinity, the sacred ram and all of that. But primeval Amen in Hermopolis, so-called Kemenu, properly called Kemenu, misnomer Hermopolis. Hermopolis is the Greek term, but Kemenu is the city of the eight. And we're talking about the cosmology of the so-called Kemenu, the 8 divinities, the quote-unquote misnomer Agdawad, the primordial 8 divinities. And they talk about how Amen and Aminette, as the Great Mother and Father, give birth to these 6 deities who come in pairs and so forth. And they are the primordial 8 divinities from which all things come into existence. But the Father and Mother is Amen and Aminette. And we're going to get into that cosmology. But first, we just want to show this textual reference. So first, you have the transliteration up here, and then you have the translation. Adobe is moving a little bit slow, but so what it translates as, your ancient throne is the mound, which is the term is Ka'et, the Ka'et, the mound of Hermopolis, really Kemenu. It is from the Lake of Two Knives that you reach land. They're talking about the primordial, pre-existent, pre-creation and so forth, when everything was in darkness and so forth. Amen and Amenet are the great being, and they bring forth these primordial 6 divinities, 3 pairs of divinities. But they say the ancient throne is in the mound of Kemenu, misnomer Hermopolis. It is from the Lake of Two Knives that you reach land. It is from the water's surface that you appear in the hidden egg, Aminette being with you. Now, the significance of that particular text is we went from the earliest religious text in existence, and then you go all the way to the late period in Kemet. And even when the Europeans begin to take over, the Eurasian begins to take over, cosmologically, when they're copying the cosmology from Ta'apet, or so-called Thebes, and Kemenu, so-called Hermopolis, and Anu, so-called Heliopolis, and so forth. When you look at the Temple of Heb and you look at the various, texts and so forth, they're taking the cosmology from the various temples all over Kemet, and they consolidated all those cosmologies and cosmological expressions in the Temple of Heb, and it's one of the most well-preserved temples because it was in the Western Desert, wasn't a lot of traffic in that area, so it's very well preserved. But the significance, of course, is from the earliest times, 5,000 plus years ago, all the way up until the end of the dynastic period, Amen and Aminette are spoken of as coming into being together to establish creation together. Now, so first let's define the name Amen. Okay, so this is one of our articles that we published. And we were talking about the origin of the name Nyame in the Akan language. Of course, Akan people derive from ancient Khanit and Kamit and so forth. So we were showing that the Akan name for the great supreme being Nyame comes directly from Ame. Here we have from the temple of Apet Reset, Amen and Aminette seated together. Aminette and Amen, Inyamewa and Inyame. So we started talking about the origin of the Akan term Inyame. You find Inyame in Akan, Inyambe in Lotsi, in Zambia, Njambe in Herero, in Namibia, Nzame in Fang, the Fang people in Gabon, and Zambe amongst Bakongo, Nyamene, and Nyamien amongst the Agni and Baule Akan people in Ivory Coast, Nyamia Amma in Senegal. So Nyame, Nyambe, Njambe, Nzambe, and so forth. You have all of these different reference points from East Afuraitkaitnut to West Afuraitkaitnut to Central to South. All over the continent, you have these variations of the name Nyame, Nyambe, Njambe, Nzambe, and so forth. Everybody is worshiping Amen, but also the female divinity Aminette. Now, so we give some cosmology, talking about An means the pillar and An meaning the eye and so forth. But what we want to get to is a title of Amen, because we don't have to go through this entire article. Ari Amen. Ari, Amen. The term Ari in ancient Kemet means I, and you'll see that the symbol is the I. You'll find that Ari or Ani in Akan means I as well, but it also means stability. So what we were showing in this particular article is that the title of Amen, Ariame, Ariame, became Onyame in Akan. Onyame in Akan, Onyambe in Lotsi, Njambe amongst the Herero, Nzame, Fang, as you can see in Zambe and so forth, variations of that name. But let's look at the cosmological understanding. You look at the meaning of the name Amen. The general term Amen means to be hidden, to be concealed. Hidden, secret, mysterious. You see the man hidden in a little sanctuary and so forth. But men also means stable, permanent, and abiding. You have Amen, Aminette. So you have the great hidden Amen, stable, permanent, and abiding Amen being. Now, so you have Amen, that's the name of the divinity, that is dealing with the attributes of the divinity. And then, of course, you have Aminette. And then we want to show the term meant. The feminine aspect is also place, abode, habitation, and so forth. So the masculine and feminine terms, Amen, the great hidden, men, stable, permanent, and abiding being, of course, that describes the divinity. Now, in Akan, of course, you have Unyame, and this is from the Santi Fanti dictionary. It can reference the heaven or sky and so forth, but Unyame, the supreme being, the deity, the god, and so forth. So this particular dictionary they began to compile it in the 1830s and 40s and so forth, and eventually released. So when they're sitting with Akan people in the forest, when these missionaries are sitting with the Akan people in the forest and so forth, and they're asking them, they're trying to translate the Akan language into English. So if they're sitting there in the 1830s and 40s and they see a dog run by, the European would say, we say dog, what do you say? And the Akan person would say, kramai, kramai. So they write down kramai means dog in Akan, or the tree language. They see an alligator or a crocodile, they'll say, we say crocodile, what do you say? They say odenchem, so they write down odenchem is the term for crocodile. So they will compile this dictionary, 600 plus page dictionary and so forth. What's important about this is when they're sitting in the forest belt with our ancestresses and ancestors in the 1830s and 40s and 50s and so forth, when they're first compiling this dictionary, some of those people were elders and eldresses. Some of those people were, in their 80s, 90s, and so forth. So if you're talking to an elder or elders and they're talking about the tradition and the language and the culture and the deities that they grew up invoking and so forth, well, if you're in the 1830s and 40s, if that elder or elders is 80 years old and 90 years old and so forth, then they were born in the 1750s and so forth. And as they're growing up in the 1750s and 60s and 70s, they're learning about the culture. They're learning their language from their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents who were born in the 1730s, 1710s, and so forth, late 1600s. So what you have in this dictionary that was compiled in the 1840s and 50s and so forth, when those elders and eldresses are speaking, they're talking about a tradition that goes back to the late so-called 1600s and 1700s that they learned from their great-grandparents. Just like I can learn something from my great-grandmother who transitioned a few months before I went to high school. I knew her and so forth, but she was born in 1899. So, but she could tell me different things and I remember things that she told me. And just like I could sit and listen to her who was born in 1899 and she can tell me certain things, the reason she could tell me something about how we practice tradition and show me something about the Hoodoo tradition and so forth in different ways. The reason she could do that is because when she was born in 1899, she learned from her parents, who were born in the 1870s, and our grandparents who were born in the 1850s, and great-grandparents who were born in the 1830s, 1820s, and so forth. And they learned that the culture from their people who were born in the 1700s. So when you have people sitting here in the 1840s, talking to a European, sharing the language and the definitions, the names of deities and so forth, they're going back to a tradition from their grandparents from the 1700s. And so when some of their grandparents were teaching them as they were growing up, they learned that. But a few of their grandparents, a small percentage of their grandparents, weren't able to teach them because they were taken in the 1700s and forced into the Western Hemisphere during the Musuo Kessie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. So they continued over here to transmit to their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, the language and the culture. And that's actually the Hoodoo tradition in North America. Akan people forced into the Western Hemisphere, Akan ancestral religion still being taught intergenerationally and transcarnationally through successive incarnations in certain blood circles. We brought a tradition. They left or were forced away in the 1700s and early 1800s before Christianity took hold in the early 1900s and mid 1900s. Before it got corrupted, before Islamicization and Christianization happened in the Akan areas, and they started trying to force monotheism on the culture, and they started trying to reduce the deities and saying we didn't believe in different deities, we only believed in the one God and we're monotheistic. That's pure fraud. You see that in the Akan tradition today, Yoruba tradition, Fang tradition, all across the continent, wherever Europeans, Eurasians with Islam, Christianity, Judaism, even Hinduism and so forth, when you see they've infected the culture, you see our people trying to make our culture and force it into monotheism, which is pure stupidity. They'll say Nyame is the great God, there are no images of him, and he created everything, and there are no shrines to him. Totally false. So what we show in this section to prove that, when you look at this section here, you see Nyame is the great God, but you also see that Onyamewa is the goddess. Nyamewa is one dialectical variant. Nyameba is another dialectical variant. Nyameba, goddess, Nyameba, Nyamebea, Nyamewa, and so forth. These are different dialectical variants based on the Akan group. You have the Akwamu, you have the Asante, you have the Fanti, different Akan groups. Certain groups use wa as a feminine suffix. Some use ba from the term oba, which means woman, as a feminine suffix and so forth. But Onyame is ame or ari ame, and Unyamewa is ari ame na. So that's amen and aminette. And we've actually had individuals, because they were unaware of this, on the continent. You have some misinformed individuals on the continent who are Akan, who were raised up by individuals who were corrupted by Christianity and Islam and so forth, who are promoting the idea that Nyame is the monotheistic God. We've had some people email us saying, well, we've never heard of Nyamewa. You must have made that up. And then you have some fools here in North America who think that we made it up just to make up a goddess. But then when you have the actual evidence, the actual text from the 1800s, the informants who were sitting there informing the writer, Nyame is goddess, Nyame is God. That's Ariame, Ariamewa. And the same is true across the board wherever we exist on the continent. So the tradition that we brought into North America is the purified tradition before it was corrupted into what it is today. So there are some people on the continent who practice a pure form of tradition. You have many other individuals who are practicing corruptions of our ancestral religious traditions. But when we were forced over here, we came over here before the corruption happened, and the tradition we passed down intergenerationally for hundreds of years in our blood circles in North America on plantations and places where we freed ourselves and so forth, that is the pure, uncut Akan tradition. The same is true for the Juju tradition, which is Yoruba, the Voodoo tradition, which is Ewe, the Wanga tradition, which is Ovambo, and the Ngangan tradition, which is Fang, found in North America. We brought down the true, uncut, purified tradition. Now, let's go back up to that. So that's what we're showing on that particular section. Now let's get into some cosmological information. Okay. Now we want to get into the pedigree. So this is Amenet. This is Amenet seated, Apet Reset. This is Amenet in the temple of Apet Asetiu, which is so-called Karnak, which, by the way, we visit when we go to Kamit. We will be traveling back to Kamit next month, but then we also have a trip that we put forward for September. And we're going to talk about that before we end the broadcast, but in September, from September 26th through October 4th, we have some spots open. If you want to travel with us to Kamit, you can do that. So all right, so we have Amen and Aminette. This is a colossal statue of Aminette, standing tall and so forth, about 10 feet tall and so forth. But we want to look at the cosmology. So once again, you have Amen and Aminette standing together, seated together and so forth, Ka and Kayet. But now you have these different divinities. You have Nut, you have Neat, you have Mut, you have Nonet. You have these different female divinities, and individuals very often call one or more of these divinities the Great Mother. Yet there's a cosmological foundation and pedigree and hierarchy with regard to these divinities. Now, so this is our recent trip last May, when we went into the temple of Apet Asetiu, and you see Amenet and Amen there. One of the things that we did, and when you look at the books we put forward, especially the Kuku Tumtum, we put that out 21 years ago. This month, as a matter of fact, we began the Kuku Tumtum with Amen and Aminette. We were already talking about the balance of male and female back then. So when you go into the temple of Apet Asetiu, which is Misnomer Karnak, and you see the great pylons like trees and so forth, when you look and when you pay attention, when you know to look, you'll see Amen together with Aminette in various places. Now you have individuals who would, visit Kamit every year, take, 30, 40, 50 people every year and so forth. That's Amen and Aminette together. And they will stand in front of these pylons and take pictures, and they will see an image of, Amen right there. And they say, this is the great God Amen Ra, and this temple complex is the great temple of Amen and so forth. And they'll take a picture of him and they'll stand next to him, and then they'll move to the next pylon. They won't pay attention to the actual divinity Amenet who's standing right next to him. So what is the reason for that? How do we come to the point where we can see her and we look right past her? Because Europeans don't focus on Amenet, even though they know she exists, but they will relegate her to just being, well, the Egyptians just created wives for their deities and they're not prominent in the cosmology. They will talk nonsense like that. Hold on a second. So you'll see this image. When I went to Kamit the first time I ever went to Kamit, I went by myself. When I went into the temple of Apet Asetiu and I was looking, I wanted to find Aminette. I wanted to find Aminette, and I wanted to find Ra'et. There are many columns, many murals. It's the largest religious complex in the world, larger than the Vatican and so forth. So there are a lot of different things. I asked, both some of the divinities to, show me exactly where she is. I walked over to a pylon and I looked up and she was right there above me. So, and the same thing happened with Ra'et. So what you see here is Amenet, and you'll see her name, Amenet Herab Apet Asetiu, which means Amenet within the sacred sanctuary of Apet Asetiu. And that's taken from this image where you see Amen and Aminette together. Here's another image in the same temple complex. You see Amen and Aminette together. And then you also see Amen, Aminette, and the female divinity Mut. And we're going to get into why that's important. So let's switch back over. So we want to look at this pedigree. And in fact, when they talk about the cosmology of the ram, in fact, let's switch over to something else real quick. We're going to pull up our book where we talk about the primordial 8 divinities, just so you can see that imagery. In our book, the Okra complex, we get into a specific section. We're talking about the cosmology of Amen. So you will see the so-called primordial 8 divinities, Amen and Aminette, Ka and Ka'ed, also called Keku and Kekuit, and so forth, Hehu and Hehut, and Nun and Anet. Now, we already met with Nun and Anet in the pyramid text when they talk about Nu and Nunet, source divinities, and then they talked about Amen and Aminette. So what happens is when you look at Ka and Ka'et, Ka and Ka'et, also Keku and Kekuit, and so forth, it says the father of the fathers of the deities, the grandmother of the deities, and so forth. What they're talking about with regard to Ka and Ka'et, the term literally means darkness, blackness. And cosmologically, they talk about the great hidden being, hidden, stable, permanent, and abiding. Just like if you close your eyes, there's darkness, but you're an invisible being that's operating within that darkness. You're conscious, you're a being, but nothing is seen yet. In the beginning, you have Amen and Aminette, the great hidden, concealed, Amen, stable, permanent, and abiding being. Their first creation are the deities Ka and Ka'et, the black substance of space. And that today is called dark energy and dark matter by the whites and their offspring. Hold on a second. So Ka and Ka'et, the black substance of space. And then the deities Hehu and Hehut. Now, if you look at Hehu and Hehut, you can see here the term He in ancient Khanit and Kemet means fire. It also means to breathe. It also means eternal and everlasting. So Hehu is the breathing process. It's expansion and contraction. Hehu is the male force of vitality, expansion, breath, heat, and eternity, everlasting, and so forth. Hehut is the contractive force of expansion, vitality, and so forth. It is the breathing principle, Hehut, the vital principle. So when Amen, Aminette create the great black substance of space, and of course, that is a substance, and we always understood that as a male expansive force and the feminine contractive force. When they infuse the divinities Hehut, into the black substance, then the black substance begins to vibrate and begin to generate waves of energy. And then the divinities Nun and Nanet, as you can see here, Nanet and Nun, or Nut and Nanet, and so forth, their names are spelled with the wave energy symbol in Kemet. And let's look at that symbol real quick. So you see the containers, and then you see the wave energy. So that is the wave energy within the great black substance. And then Nun and Nonet are considered the father and mother of Ra and Ra'et. So if you look at it in the context, if you look at pouring water into a pot, water is formless. It can take any form. It can take any shape. Its potential is unlimited and so forth. So if you pour water in a pot, that's akin to Ka and Ka'at, the black substance of space that is formless. It has the capacity to take any form and so forth. But at some point, originally, it's not formed yet into anything. Then if you put He, the term He means heat. The term He means breath. The term He means eternal and everlasting. Your breath is eternal and everlasting. So you constantly breathe from the time you're born until the time you transition. He, hu, he, hu, he, hu. He, eternal, everlasting. He, meaning breath. He, meaning heat. You have fire breathing and so forth, expansion and contraction. You can heat just your body up and so forth. So Amen and Aminette first create the formless substance that has the infinite potential to take any form. Of course, if you're going to have a creation, you have to have a substance that has infinite potential. That is Ka and Ka'at. Then they infuse the He, hu, expansion and contraction, vital force within the black substance, and it begins to vibrate. No different than if you add heat, He, to water in a pot, then all of a sudden it begins to vibrate, expansion and contraction. And then when it continues to vibrate, you notice waves of energy begin to manifest within the water. And now the waves are moving back and forth in the pot, carrying energy back and forth. And then once the waves wave to a point where they're very rapid, the wave energy generates spheres, which are bubbles that rise up out of the pot and explode. So it's the same cosmology here. You have Amen and Amenet, the great hidden, concealed, permanent, and abiding being. They first create the formless substance, the black substance of space. They infuse Hehu and Hehut. So that was Ka and Ka'at. And they give birth to Hehu and Hehut within the black substance. They cause waves of energy to move within the black substance. That is the birth of Nun and Nonet, wave energy moving within the black substance. But eventually, the waves become so rapid that they generate spheres. And those spheres become the divinities Ra and Ra'et, the first fire and light in creation. Now, let's switch over to that real quick so you can see that was one of our books. We're going to show you another one of our books where we talk about Ra and Ra'et. So this is Ra, the creator of the universe, Ra'et, the creatress of the universe. They have the solar disk on the head and so forth. You see that red solar disk and you see the yellow golden solar disk and so forth. You look in the body and you see the bone marrow and you see the red bone marrow and the yellow bone marrow and so forth. You'll see where that fire energy manifests as red and yellow comes from, but building blocks of energy within your body. But you see in Yonkumpon and in Yonkunton in the Akan language, that is Ra and Ra'et in Kamet, the creator and creatress. Just like Amen and Aminette, there's never been a time when there was just Ra. There was never a time when there was just Ra'et. There's Ra and Ra'et. So they're the first fire and light that manifests from the waves within the black substance. The wave energy creates spheres. Those bubbles explode into fire and light. And then the energy of Ra and Ra'et, spiraling fire, carving out black spheres within the black substance. And that fire energy carves out black spheres, and you have black spheres. Then the energy of Ra and Ra'et penetrates the black spheres to illuminate them, and those become the first stars. And of course, stars are black bodies that give off black body radiation and so forth. So it's Ra and Ra'et, the fire energy, the energy of fire and light begin to spiral through the black substance. They carve out these black spheres, illuminate these black spheres. Those become the first stars. Eventually, one of those stars is our star, the sun, and so forth, the Oriya, as we say in Akan. And then, the bodies of the planets come from the stars. The energy of Ra and Ra'et penetrates and enlivens and vitalizes these planetary bodies. And separation takes place from the denser elements to the lighter elements. And then you have an atmosphere and everything else. So this is the cosmology of creation. We're talking about Amen and Aminette, give birth to Ka and Ka'at, give birth to Nun Hehu and Hehu, vital principle, expansion, contraction, breathing, life, eternal, everlasting. Then Nun and Nunet, the wave energy that has the potential to create all things, and that wave energy manifests as fire and light. Once it becomes very rapid, the waves become spheres, and that's the spherical energy of Ra and Ra'et. They're shown as the serpent swallowing its tail. That is Da and Ida Huedu in Vodun, the rainbow serpent, creator and creatress of the universe. That is Odumare and Oshumare in Yoruba, the rainbow serpent that swallows its tail, male and female, creator and creatress of the universe. So that's in Yonkonpon and Yonkonton and Akan, same thing. The great serpent, the great circular serpent, the great arch serpent, and so forth. So that is the cosmology. Now, once you have Ra and Ra'et creating the universe, bringing things into being and so forth, and then we get to Earth. Now let's switch over. Okay. So we talked about Amenet and Aminette, of course, Ka and Ka'et, Hehu and Herhut. We just talked about Nanet. That's the mother of Ra. Nun, the primordial energy within the black substance and so forth. The wave, electromagnetic wave energy within the black substance, masculine and feminine, are Nun and Nanet. That is Nun and Nanet. They are the mother and father of Ra. When you look in texts like the Book of the Cow of Heaven and various other texts, you'll find that Ra refers to his, Nun as his father. Ra talks about his ancestresses and ancestors. Ra talks about his elders and eldresses. Look at the destruction of mankind, the book of coming forth by day, and so forth. Now, so Nun is the father, Nunet or Nonet, and she's also spelled Nut in the pyramid text, the Meru text, the wave energy within the black substance. Now, when we talk about these other divinities, we want to look at what is the difference. So that's the hierarchy. Amen and Aminette, Ka and Ka'et, Hehu and Hehu, Nun and Nanet, pre-creation. Then Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, the spiraling fire and light, creating all things. They have the creator and creatress, and they begin to create everything and everybody, all the different divinities, planets, suns, moons, and stars. Then they place divinities within, for example, Ptah, the deep core, inner core of Earth, and Sekhmet is there as well. A number of different divinities. As the Earth unfolds and it has this, deep core, and then the lower mantle and upper mantle and lower crust and upper crust and so forth. There are different spiritual forces that animate these different features of creation. The same with other planets as well. Now, when you look, for example, at the divinity Nut, people will often say, well, Nut is our great mother. At first, let us just look at this real quick. This is Ra'et. Oh. This is Ra'et, the creatress. That is from the temple of Kansu. That's Norma Konsu. That is Konsu and Ra'et. That is in the precinct of Mut within the temple of Apet. I said to you, we're going to have access to that particular shrine space. It is under construction right now, so you can't enter it. But one time when I was in Kamit, I asked if we could go to that specific area because I knew what I was looking for. I was looking for this image, this mural, this great mural, and this is on a wall inside of a temple, a chapel area, and so forth. I was looking for this image of Ra'et. You have to get permission, authorization, permits and so forth to go into temples that are, being renovated and so forth. So you have to go through that process. But this is the temple of Khonsu in the precinct of Mut in our Petasetu, so-called Karnak. And this is where you'll find Ra'et. I knew what I was looking for. So once again, many of our people go to Kamit year after year after year, decade after decade. They stand in front of images of Amen, totally disregard Aminette, the Great Mother. Stand in front of images of Ra, totally disregard Ra'et, the Creatress. So, but if you don't have that consciousness to even know to look for them, when you're engaged in ritual practice in an authentic fashion, they won't allow you to just look at Amen or just pray to Amen or Inyamewa. The divinity will make you search for the balance until you find the balance. They will show it to you, but then they will confirm it for you. I couldn't just simply pray to Amen or Inyame and leave it there. Aminette or Inyamewa and my Insaman for the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors wouldn't allow me to. They would say, no, there's a balance. You need to find the balance. And of course, we did that. So, okay, so that's where I at. And once again, this is in the temple of Apetasetiu. You can see her name right here, Ra Et, and it's the solar disc, the open mouth, the forearm, and so forth, the solar disc, and then Tawi's Ra'et of the world and so forth on one of the many pylons that you find her. And once again, that is a situation where I wanted to find Ra'et. I came all the way to Kamit. I wanted to find a specific image of Ra'et. This is one I took on my phone and so forth. I want to show who we've been talking about. When we first put out the Kuku Tumtum and talked about Ra and Ra'et 21 years ago, and Amen and Aminette, and Ma'ah and Ma'at, the male deity of divine law, Ma'ah, and the female divinity of divine law, Ma'at. I wanted to find all these different divinities as proof. We knew they existed in the text, but we wanted to have primary evidence. And of course, I found Ma'ah in the tomb of Ramesu VI, as well as other papyri and so forth when I was there. The first time I went by myself, found Ra'et. I was standing once again by a pylon. I was looking for her, asked the Unsamanfo, the ancestral spirits, to show her to me. I walked over to a pylon, looked up, and she was right there. So, but let's switch it over. All right. So let's look at Nut, for example. People know about Nut. You see her bent over the earth divinity Geb. In reality, Geb is the earth's crust. Nut is the atmosphere. So sometimes you will see her with the stars in her body. And the reason for that is when you have the earth and so forth, of course, the crust of earth, and at nighttime, the atmosphere is surrounding the earth, of course. When you look through the sky, of course, you can see the stars. So Nut is the atmosphere surrounding earth. Geb is not the earth deity. Geb is the earth's crust. So you have Ptah, which is deep within the core, as well as Sekhmet. Then above that, you have Atem and Atemet, which is the lower mantle. Then the next layer is the son and daughter of Atem and Atemet, which is Shu and Tefnut. They are in the upper mantle. And then Shu and Tefnut in the genealogy give birth to Geb and Nut. Geb is the earth's crust. Nut is the atmosphere surrounding the earth. And then Geb and Nut give birth to two sets of twins, Asar, Aset, Set, and Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, Asar is Kam-Ur, is the great black one, operating through the black soil substance of earth. Aset operating through the river waters of earth. Nebuchadnezzar operating through the rain waters of earth. Set, the red one, operating through the red soil, the desert, as well as the red clay and so forth. So black soil, river water, red soil, rainwater, and so forth. So Geb and Nut, the crust and the atmosphere, give birth to Asar, Aset, Set, and Nebuchadnezzar. So there's a pedigree that we're talking about. You have Amenet, the Great Mother. She gives birth, Ka and Kaet, gives birth to Hehu and Hehu, gives birth to Nun and Narnet. Nun and Narnet give birth to Ra and Ra'et. Ra and Ra'et give birth to Atem and Atemet and Ptah and Setchima and so forth. You look in the book of the Cow of Heaven, and you see the birth of Sekhmet and so forth. And they talk about her being the eye of Ra, the Arit Ra. That is a title. She's born out of the eye of Ra and so forth. That is a title of Ra'et. So when they talk about Ra and they say, your eye, one of the titles of Ra'ed is Arit Ra, the eye of Ra. And Arit also means to make or do or to create tricks, the womb space and so forth, that fashions and forms. So when you have Ra and his eye, the eye of Ra and so forth, in that context, you're talking about Ra and Ra'et giving birth to Setchima or Sekhmet. So, but there is a pedigree. Now, so when you see Nut, for example, clearly Nut is not the Great Mother. She's simply the atmosphere surrounding Earth, but the black substance of space wherein Nun and Nanet, their energy dwells, they are greater than Nut. Nut, as a great-granddaughter of Nunet, who is also called Nut, takes on her name Nut. Her full name is Nunet or Nonnet, but she takes on that title Nut. She's a great-granddaughter of Nanet, but they are not the same. Sometimes people mix up Nut and Nunet because their names are similar, and sometimes they're spelled exactly the same, but these are two different divinities. So clearly, she is not the Great Mother. When they talk about Nut, however, giving birth to Ra, that she's the mother of Ra, well, when the sun rises in the east, you'll see that they will show Nut giving birth to sun. They'll show her womb in the east on the eastern horizon, and then they will show her mouth on the western horizon. So they'll say she swallows the sun at night and it moves in the underworld, the darkness in the underworld, the 12 hours of the night, and then she gives birth to the sun in the morning. When the sun rises in the east, within the atmosphere, so to speak, Nut is giving birth to the solar disk on Earth, and then it moves through the sky, moves through her body, sets in the west, and then she swallows the sun and it goes into the underworld and so forth. But that's within the planet. That's the solar energy as it's captured. Of course, the sun is 93 million miles away, so the sun, of course, is not being swallowed by the atmosphere, but the solar energy that's captured 93 million miles away to the planet is captured in the atmosphere, and Nut gives birth to the quote-unquote sun every morning. She's a mother divinity in that context, but she didn't give birth to the force, Ra and Ra'et. She gives birth to his energy and Ra'et's energy throughout the planet to bring that solar fire, heat, and vitality to the planet. So she's not a mother divinity. We saw the female divinity Mut. And when you look at the term Mut, you'll see that Mut, the general term, means water. Mu is the masculine version. Mut is the feminine version, and so forth. And you see her with the vases in her hands. So Mut is the primordial water, the oceans on the planet and so forth, but also the water in your body. Your body is 70+% water. Everything dwells within that. Water purifies, it transmits electromagnetic energy and so forth. So she's the Great Mother, purification, rejuvenation, revitalization, cleansing, all these different things. But that's the water within the system. The water surrounding the planet Earth is Mut on the feminine side, Mu on the masculine side. In your body, it's Mu and Mut internally, but she's not the Great Mother. In your body, the black substance of space, physiologically, is the internal stores of melanin, the black substance that all of your organs and systems are dwelling within that black substance. Your organs and glands are like the planets and so forth. They're dwelling within the black substance that is the melanin, substance within your body and within your brain and so forth. And then you have water throughout your body that is Mu and Mut. So if you're like, on the masculine side, you're like Amen. On the feminine, you're Aminette. You're the great being, male and female. The black substance within you, that those internal stores of melanin, are the Ka and Kayet, the black substance of space. When you breathe, expand, and contract, that is your Hehu and Hehut. the wave energy within the black substance, that electromagnetic wave energy within the black substance that you feel even when you're sitting still. You have energy that's humming or vibrating or idling within you. But when you begin to expand it and you generate that fire, then you heat yourself up, whether you're trying to exercise or fight or engage in some form of martial arts or sexual arousal, whatever it is. You can take that idling wave energy and expand it into explosive fire. Then you give birth to your Ra force and your Ra'et force, your life force energy, your divine living energy. And that divine living solar golden energy is your energetic link to the spirits of the deities and ancestral spirits. And through that link of energy, they can possess your spirit possession, spirit communication, divination, and so forth. All right. So Mu and Mut, Great Mother Divinity. Now, when you look at Mu and Mut, the ocean on earth, the primordial ocean and so forth, the water in your body, and then spiritually, there's a spiritual quote unquote ocean. The water system within creation spiritually is the realm of the ancestresses and ancestors. So just like you have the black substance of space, and it has suns and moons and stars and planets, and those radiant entities carry energy and power and so forth. Those are the shrines of deities. But then there's a water system within the black substance of space, within creation, that invisible, quote unquote, spiritual water system. That is the ancestral realm. Just like in your physical body, you have the melanin, the black substance. It's electromagnetic energy conductor and so forth, stimulates and transmits energy from your organs and glands, and your entire nervous system is dependent on melanin. Your brain is dependent on these the nerve ganglia, neuromelanin and so forth, or else you wouldn't be able to function properly. So your entire body is dependent on that black substance, all your organs, glands, systems, and everything else. But when cells die, say your heart cell, a child of the heart deity, their parent deity, when they serve their parent deity, the heart, their parent Orisha or parent Abosom or parent Vodou, then they're serving you, the supreme being, at the same time. Your liver cell serves the liver deity, its parent deity, the deity that governs its spiritual head, is serving you at the same time. But when the cell dies, the water in the cell goes back into the interstitial fluid, the water in the body. It gets purified, cleansed, rejuvenated, and then reconstituted into a new cell. That's reincarnation and so forth. So that cell dies, it goes into the water system of the body, and then it comes back and is reborn into organs, glands, systems, and so forth. So the water system is the purificatory system. It transmits energy while the cells are living. It reconstitutes cells when they transition and become reformed. The same thing with the ancestral community. They nourish us. They transmit energy to us. Water is a conductor of electricity. They transmit the energy of the deities to us. They purify us. They get us on the right track and so forth. When we transition, we go to the water system. We become reconstituted, rejuvenated, replenished, and then we reincarnate, the Akan term Bebra, back into the physical world. So that spiritual energy of water and so forth is the ancestral realm that is governed by Mut, but she's not the mother divinity. Just like the water in your system is not you, the great being, that's a portion of you. That's the Mut within you. Yes, the cells are dependent on Mut, so she's a mother to them. All the cells in your body are dependent on water. She's a mother to them, but she's not the mother divinity. Aminette is the great being. She's the mother divinity, and she gives birth to Nut. All right. So we talked about Mut. Now we have Neat. We want to talk about Neat quickly. If you look at Neat and you see her headdress, she wears the red crown and so forth. Sometimes it's gold. She's shown as an archeress, and she's also shown with the shuttle, the weaver, the divine weaver, and so forth. You look at the term Neat is the wavy energy line. Sometimes they show her with the 2 crossed arrows, sometimes with the shuttle on her head. So that's the weaving shuttle and so forth. So you see the energetic force there's wave energy, but Neat also has to do with water and streams and so forth. Now, as an archeress, as well as a weaver. When you look at her husband, Kunwemu, who's the one who fashions the form and fuses the form of the soul and the body on the divine potter's wheel and so forth. Neat as an archeress, she governs the skein glands in the woman, and her husband, Kunemu, governs the prostate gland in the male. They are husband and wife. His name is written with the symbol of the Kunem, the pot. They talk about Kunem being the deity south at the southern border of Kamit. He unbolts the gate to release the flood of the river so it can fertilize the land. The little pot inside of the male is the prostate gland that processes the seminal fluid. And when the gate is unopened and so forth, the bulge is released, then the seminal fluid can come out of the pot, the kunem, the kumimu, and it's going to go and fertilize. So he's the wave energy within that, seminal fluid and so forth. On the feminine side, you have Neat as an archeress. She's the one that shoots out, and that she facilitates the shooting out of the ovum and so forth, but also the skein glands, the periurethral glands that have to do with lubrication, but also purification and dealing with bacteria, keeping the person, safe from bacteria and so forth in the reproductive process. Just like the seminal fluid is the ejaculatory or release from kunwemu, from the pot, from the prostate gland, the skein glands are called the female prostate. So when she's shown as an archeress, she's releasing the fluid during the sex act. She's facilitating the release or the shooting of the ovum. But then once the archeress helps to release the egg, it goes and then it implants itself in the womb. And now the archeress becomes a weaver. So when she helps to shoot out the egg and so forth, and Kunem sends the fluid that carries the sperm cell. So you have the fluid, seminal fluid, and the sperm cell is swimming in the fluid. You have the ovum cell, of course, in the blood and so forth, and the cell is inside the blood. Then the sperm and ovum unite. Kunem, the ram-headed divinity who's sitting at the potter's wheel, fusing together the body and the soul. His energy fuses together Kunwem, the sperm cell and ovum cell. He fuses them together. So when they talk about him on the potter's wheel and he's fusing together the two, he's fusing that energy together. And once it's fused together, then the genetic material of the father and the genetic material of the mother begins to be braided together or weaved together. Once the fusion happens because of Kunwemu, then Neat shifts from being the archeress to the weaver. She braids together the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosomal DNA. And as she's braiding that together, it's implanted in the womb. And of course, the womb is governed by Set. So what we're talking about is the wave energy, Neat, with the wavy line within the water. The water of the body is Mut, and the wave energy within the water is Neat. And that wave energy can manifest at first as some shooting energy, but then it's also weaving together. The wave energy within the black substance of space, once again, let's go back to that. Okay, so Neat is the wave energy within water, within Mut, the water that surrounds the world and so forth, the water in your body. That wave energy within the water, within the fluid, is Neat. But the wave energy within the black substance of space is Nun and Nonet. So both of their names are spelled with the wavy line for the n sound, the n sound, Nunet and Neat. But the difference is the wave energy in the water, Neat is connected to Mut. She's the wave energy within the water. Nonet is connected to Ka'et. She's the wave energy within the black substance of space. So when we talk about this pedigree of the Great Mother, you'll see that Amen, Aminette give birth to Ka and Ka'et, Herhu and Herhu, Nun and Nonet give birth to Ra and Raed give birth to Atem and Atemet and so forth. They give birth to Shu and Tefnut, and Shu and Tefnut give birth to Gebenut, and Gebenut give birth to Asar, Aset, Set, and Nebuchadnezzar. There's a hierarchy here. But we don't want to lose sight of who the Great Mother is. If you were to, and let's deal with some, hold on a second. Well, first, before we go on with that, anybody have any questions about any of that in the chat room? We want to check out. I see there's a lot of comments in the chat room. I just want to make sure I didn't miss a question. Okay. Hold on a second. Okay. Now, there's one other piece that's important. Then we're going to get into what I was just about to say, but you don't want to neglect the function, or what is the role of the Great Mother. Just look at your own mother. Of course, mothers give birth and nurse and so forth. Imagine a child being born and so forth. The mother is taken away and they're raised specifically by their father. If they don't have a woman in their life, are they going to be balanced if they don't have breast milk? Are they going to be balanced if the energy of the mother, that maternal energy, is not infused and replenished within the child? Of course, you carry the mitochondrial DNA, you carry that ovum cell that's connected to your matriclan ancestresses and ancestors, as well as the matriclan abosom, as we call it in Akan, the abusi abosom, the matriclan divinity. So that energetic force that you inherit through your blood circle on the matriclan side, and the matriclan deity that's governed your people for thousands of years, that has to do with your personality, that has to do with an aspect of your energetic expression and so forth. If you're cut off from that intellectually or physically and so forth, imagine someone trying to grow and develop without breast milk. Imagine somebody trying to grow and develop with that energetic force of the mother. So they become imbalanced. When we don't invoke Aminette and align ourselves on the feminine side with the Great Mother Divinity, we become imbalanced. So you see individuals who are self-destructive, promiscuous, criminal in different ways, negatively expansive in their energy and so forth, not introspective, not focused, disciplined and so forth. When you don't invoke, so we invoke Inyamewa. First Inyamewa and Inyame. When we pour libation, the first thing entity we invoke is Inyamewa and Inyame, or Aminette and Amen. And in Vodun, that will be Mawu is the Great Mother, and Lisa is the Great Father, and in Igbo is Komosu is the Great Mother, and Chukwu is the Great Father, and so forth. In reality, in Yoruba, Olokun is the Great Mother, Olorun is the Great Father. If you look at earlier cosmology, they will talk about Olorun and Olokun being the two great beings at the beginning, before anything else was created. This idea that Olorun is the great god and so forth, and Olokun was reduced to a feminine, female Orisha later, that's a corruption of cosmology. When you look at the Edo tradition, who also worships Olokun as well, you'll see she's Great Mother Divinity. But when you don't invoke that energetic force, then you become imbalanced. So that's key. It's not just cosmological, it's not just intellectual. We're talking about the difference between a child trying to grow and develop without breast milk, and just, they can't nurse on the chest of the father, even though these crackers want you to believe that they can, because they're perverts. But if they try to do that, they will be malnourished, they will be weak, they will lack, structure, they'll be emaciated and so forth. You have to get the energy from the mother as well as the father. Now, there's one more piece we want to touch on before we're done. Okay, so in regards to that, we want to show you a specific, one of many, artifacts from Kamit, but this is important. So this is the cuboid statue of Ser Jethuti. He's a master sculptor, and I said to you, and it's a late period statue, very well preserved, but his titles, he has different priestly titles. He was from a lineage, a blood circle of priests and priestesses, and he has a number of different titles. He's working with different divinities, but it's very relevant to what we're talking about. So the statue itself, just so you can see the image of it. The head was broken off, but so it's a very well-preserved piece. They're talking about his different titles, and this isn't the only piece associated with him. You know, they find different artifacts associated with him, talking about his lineage, talking about the priests and priestesses from his father and grandfather and great-grandfather and so forth. But the reason why this stood out to us is because of one of his priestly titles. And it goes back to us focusing on real cosmology and dealing directly with divinities, as opposed to simply imitating what Europeans have to say. For example, when we talked about, if Europeans don't talk about aminette, then we don't talk about aminette. That's like if you're born on a plantation and they took your mother away when you were little and your father was there, and the Europeans said, well, you have a father, but you don't have a mother. You came out of your father's body. And you grew up believing that and trying to operate based on that. That's idiotic. So because Europeans don't focus on Aminette or Europeans don't focus on Ra'at, not only do we not seek to look for them critically, we don't seek to invoke them. We don't seek to invoke them and align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with the Great Mother that governs everything in the universe, the divine living energy, Ra'at, that animates us. And when we expand that energy, we can become possessed by and communicate with the deities, the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, and the Nananoman Samafo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, as well as plant life, animal life, mineral life, plant totems, animal totems, mineral totems, and so forth, the spiritual forces that govern them. So we can learn medicine from plant life and mineral life and energetic force from animal life with these animal totems. When we expand the energy of Ra and Ra'at, we can do that. But if we don't, we cut ourselves off, not just intellectually, but we become spiritually imbalanced. Look at the different quote unquote leaders of these spiritual groups, whether they're so-called Kemetic groups or, Yoruba groups or Akan groups or groups dealing with Vodun or dealing with various forms of spirituality. Not just the women, but also the men. Look at the imbalance that manifests. When you're trying to sleep with everybody in the temple, you're not invoking Amenet and realigning with the balance of the Great Mother. You don't even know she exists. So you're totally neglecting her and you're imbalanced in a destructive fashion on the other side. So when you look at emotionalism, the way people operate, the way people build, the way they communicate, things that they establish, endeavors that they engage in, when you see the missing link of the Great Mother that actually governs creation, then you see all of the corruption. Imagine twins inside the womb of their mother, and they can hear their father speaking. And they're like, hey, we have a father. And if somebody said, well, you have a mother too. They're like, well, I've never seen her. And they're literally in her womb. That's us operating like we've never, been in link or connection with Aminette, Inyamewa, and so forth. Now, so you have people going back and forth to Kemet, calling themselves experts, writing papers, writing books, PhDs, and so forth. Never mention Aminette one time in 30 years. Never mention Ra'at one time in 30 years. Never mention Ma'al, the male deity of divine law and balance, in connection with Ma'at. Never mention these deities, and of course, never invoke them. So they're imbalanced from the start. Their entire organization is imbalanced from the start. Unless you're instinctively in alignment, even if you don't know the name of the divinity, but you're in alignment instinctively, then you can bring that balance back. But when you look at this statue, this cuboid statue, the significance for this particular piece is his titles. Now you can see him bowing before the divinities. So, and Maku Her Amen Mut Khen Su, the one venerated before Amen Mut and Khen Su, and the great Postjatu and Eniad within Ta Pedo, so-called Thebes, the God's father, embracer of the watch at eye. Now, when they talk about the God's father, and this is important for people who are involved in the priesthood and so forth. At Ntorot means the God's father, so that's a male priest, father of the divinity, meaning they take care of the ritual purifications and so forth. Sometimes they get possessed by the deity and so forth. When you go to this person, just like you go to a priest or a priestess in traditional religion, they do divination, they get possessed by the divinity. They're the quote unquote mother of the divinity or father of the divinity within the community because they get possessed and mounted by the deity. So At Ntoro means the father At of Ntoro, the deity. Embracer of the watch at eye, carrier of Ra, priest, him, Himat, or him Ntoro Hapi, meaning the priest of Hapi, him Ntoro, the priest of the august standard of Kunwemu, Satet, and Anuket. We just talked about Kunwemu, the deity that fashions and fuses together the body and the soul on the potter's wheel and so forth. He's the Hem Ntoro of Sekhmet within Elephantine, which is Abu. And here's the important piece. Wab Aminette Hert Ab Apet Sut. He was a Wab priest of Amenet within Apet Asetu. He's a priest of Amenet. So when you look at people talking about ancient Kemet, not only do they not mention Amenet at all, but they didn't know there were priests dedicated and priestesses dedicated as servants of Amenet herself. That's, of course, common knowledge within, the ancient culture. Of course, it would be common knowledge for people who practice tradition. And of course, they know that we communicate with this great mother and so forth. So it's not a surprise at all for us. But if you've been following the scholarship, quote unquote, of Europeans, or blackening up that scholarship, or if you just have a mindset where you try to break away from Eurocentric scholarship, become Afrocentric, but still caught up in some Eurocentrism, like some of our people trying to blacken up Jesus or blacken up Muhammad or say that we're the ancient Israelites and so forth. Of course, Jesus never existed of any form or of any race whatsoever. Muhammad never existed. We've proven that in our book, Kuku Tuntum, and showed how these fictional cartoon characters were manufactured. Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, Brahman, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Moses, Aaron, David, and so forth. Jesus, Yeshua, Isa, Yahweh, whatever term you want to utilize. All of these characters are fictional cartoon characters who never existed of any form or of any race whatsoever. So we know that when we study our cosmology, and we can prove, and we have proven, exactly where they stole names and titles of actual deities, like Mu Hap Met, the waters Mu, remember Mu, waters, of Hap, the deity Hap, of the north, Mu Hap Met, the waters of the northern Nile, the spirit that animates the waters of the northern Nile, Mu Hap Met, and they corrupted that into Muhammad. Of course, Muhammad never existed. They're talking about a spiritual force that animates the northern Nile. We have images of him and cosmology associated with him and everything. Same thing with all these other fictional characters. But when we deal with the actual tradition, of course, Aminette, the Great Mother, has priests, just like when you go to the temple of Aperasetu, so-called Karnak, of course, you see priests of Amen all over the place. But sometimes when you see the female priests, and they're Hemat Ntorot, the wife of the god and so forth, and they talk about being the wife of the god Amen and so forth, very often that's where the Europeans stop their focus. They know about the wife of the god, the Hemat Ntorot, but they never take time, even within a text like this, they just glide right by the fact that he's a Wab priest of Aminette. Because to them, that's not important. To us, that's critical. But to them, it doesn't mean anything because they're not connected like that, of course. Now, okay. All right. So that is the information we want to share. We just want to give that pedigree of Aminette in relation to the various female mother divinities. They're all mother divinities, but they're not the Great Mother. So we know who the Great Mother is, and we start from that point, the Great Mother and Great Father, the ritual invocation of them, and the various major divinities, in succession and so forth. It's no different than your body and the black substance of space, and the water system, and the organs and glands and systems and so forth. It's the same hierarchy. Now, so of course, if anybody has any questions or comments in the chat, we'll check that out. One thing we do want to share with everybody. Okay, so our Adikat Cosmology of Creation tour to Kamit. Of course, next month we're going, but we scheduled a separate tour for September for those who were not able to come in May. So you'll see that here. And we also have, we have our regular, hold on a second. Okay, so we have our regular tour in the spring, usually late May or early June and so forth. So that's what we have next month. But we inserted one in the fall and autumn tour for those who couldn't make it in May, but didn't want to wait all the way until next year in June. We do have our yearly one scheduled for June 4th through June 12th. And we will, just so you can see that, pull that up for you real quick. Okay, so when you scroll on the page, you'll see that particular flyer is June 4th through the 12th for next year. And of course, if you want to, make a down payment to reserve that space, you can do so. We have, for the September tour that's coming up, our tour is $3,000. That includes a round trip flight from JFK to Cairo and so forth. We have vegan meal options and so forth. We go to the various sites, and everybody goes to the various different sites, the cruise and so forth, all these different things. We try to make ours affordable. But what we have for September, just like we did for this past May, we were able to do just a few spaces for 50% off. So instead of $3,000 for the tour, it will be $1,500. We have 4 spaces for that. Of course, we can't do that for everybody. It's impossible, but we were able to do a couple of them for May. So we decided to do a few of them for September. So the September 26th, October 4th tour, there are a few spaces available for the 50% discount. You will see that up under the flyer. In order to take advantage of that, because we only have a few spaces, you would have, like we did before, you would either pay the entire amount up front, or you would pay 50%, $750, and then within 2 weeks you would pay the other $750. But it's first come, first serve. We only have 4 spaces, so whoever gets to that first, then that goes to them. So we always try to do that for some people who thought that they could never make it to Kamit. Some people who may not want to wait all the way until next June for the regular spring tour, but you can do that for the spring tour. For the spring tour, we also have a few spaces June 4th through June 12th next year. We have a few spaces for the 50% off. You'll see that on the page when you scroll down. But for the September tour, we have a few spaces left for the 50% off. So if you would like to take advantage of that, you can do that. All the information is on the Adikat page. Let me put that in the chat room. Okay. Um, okay. Okay. No, so I saw a comment. Shu is not Yeshua at all. Yeshua is a corruption of Su Neferhetep Peru. Su is the son of Amen and Mut. And Su, the falcon-headed divinity, is the son of Amen and Mut. They corrupted Su and Su and Yeshua and Jesus and so forth. Fictional character who never existed. There was no black Yeshua. There was no white one. Shu is a totally different divinity. Shu and Tefnut operate through the upper mantle and so forth, the fiery energy, magma, fire energy within the, upper mantle. They also operate within the pleural cavity within the body and so forth. That is their shrine. So Shu has nothing to do with the fictional character Yeshua. All right. Kane Su, and they'll spell it Konsu. Um, and that was the temple that image of Ra'et that we showed. That was the temple of Konsu in the precinct of Mut. So, okay, so we have that. And then we also want to show you what we just started a couple of weeks ago. So we started our own podcast, the Hoodoo Cast. Our first episode is up. We will have a weekly podcast. We traveled to New Orleans. I interviewed Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau, who practices the Voodoo tradition that's been preserved for hundreds of years in North America. It has nothing to do with Haiti. Voodoo was brought into North America by Ewe people hundreds of years ago, for example, in Louisiana, and they've been practicing ever since. Some people assume that Voodoo came into Louisiana because of the Haitian Revolution and people migrating up from Haiti into, Louisiana, but actually Voodoo was in Louisiana 100 years before the Haitian Revolution. So, but we interviewed Kalinda Laveau, but then of course, she interviewed me as well. So we were talking about voodoo and hoodoo. It was a special kind of podcast because that was our 8th annual Echisan Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference. We typically have that conference around the spring equinox every year. We normally have it here in DC. We have vendors and speakers and so forth. This year, I decided to go to New Orleans as the first kind of informal episode of the Hoodoo Cast, the podcast, and so forth. But weekly, we will have new episodes going to different cities. It's a traveling podcast and so forth, dealing with the Hoodoo tradition, which is Akan ancestral religion in North America. The ancient Khanit, Nubian people migrated west, established the Akan Empire, moved from the western portions in the savanna regions into the forest belt about 1,000 years ago because of Muslim invasions, reestablished the Akan Empire, Khanat or Khanit, Nubian Empire in the forest belt. And then some of us were taken from there hundreds of years later and ended up in the Western Hemisphere. So we're talking about Hoodoo from the firm foundation of Akan ethnic identity. Many people assume that Hoodoo is just an amalgamation of different African practices and so forth. Totally inaccurate. Those individuals were unaware of the Akan identity of the tradition. They'll try to say it's not a religion and we just deal with ancestral spirits and root work. Root work is only 1/8 of the Hoodoo tradition. There's a pantheon of Hoodoo divinities that have always been, of course. There's, root work is 1/8 of the tradition, but we talk about Hoodoo in the real context, the authentic context, as Akan ancestral religion preserved in the blood circles of our spirit genetic ancestresses and ancestors in North America for the past 300 plus years. So we'll be going from city to city, interviewing men and women who practice the Hoodoo tradition in an authentic capacity. So that is the Hoodoo Cast. And the first episode is up, and what we have done with that, we have it's on right now. It's on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. It'll be up on Apple Music in any day now, and of course we'll be posting links on Twitter and so forth. So the visuals will be posted like the day after the audio on the streaming platforms and so forth. But what we also have, what we have established, we have a Hoodoo Cast Patreon account. If you join our Patreon account, we have a number of different things there. The monthly fee is $7.77. Of course, you get access to the podcast early. You get access to, for example, our award-winning film, Odwirafo Adibisa, African American Ancestral Divination. But also, we have 38 online courses that we have conducted. You'll see that on our website, but those who join the Hoodoo Patreon, community, you'll have access to those courses. We are uploading those courses. So we have 9 different courses, like some of them are 4-week courses, some of them were 6-week courses on the Hoodoo tradition. We have a 6-week course on the nature of the Okra, the soul, the divine consciousness. When we showed in our book, the Okra complex, and we were talking about the cosmology of Kemenu and so forth, the nature of the soul in the Akan tradition, the Okra is the same as the Ori Inu in Yoruba, and the Ka and Kai in ancient Kemet, and the Se Lido in Vodun. We did a 6-week course on that based on our book. Many of these 38 courses are based on our 31 books. All 31 of our books are free downloads from our website. You join Patreon, you have access to anything behind the scenes. You have access, of course, to the podcast, which everybody has access to that, but also the film, our upcoming film, our second film that's coming up, and the 38 different online courses that normally are $10 or $15 and so forth, but with the $7.77 a month, you'll have access to all these different courses as well as any other content that we put forward. So, as well as discounts on things like retreats, when we go to, our trips to Kamit, our retreat to South Carolina, Edisto Island in February, Ancestral, Cultural, and Ritual Retreat, when we go to the ocean and so forth. So a number of different things happening with the Patreon account, and that allows people to support what we're doing. We've been giving away our 31 books for free for a number of years. Over 10 years, we've been one of the few groups, since I published those 31 books. Most people don't give away their books for free online. They, charge for them. We made our information accessible for free to everyone. So for years, people have been downloading by the thousands per month the various 31 books. So if you support the work we've been doing and the work that we're planning to do, we have a new documentary coming out very soon. Join our Patreon. That will assist us greatly. And once again, if you would like to go to Kamit with us in September or June, you can take advantage of the 50% discount, or, you can, of course, we have a payment plan, so a $300 deposit, and you can make monthly payments until you pay your triple. Okay. Okay, so there's a question about the planets of the solar system. So one of our book series deals with that. Okay, so our Akradim Boson series, we have books as well as articles on all these divinities. For the deities in the Akan tradition, when you hear people named Kwesi and Kojo and Kwame and Akosua and Kofi and Ama and so forth, the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern all natural cycles on Earth every 7 days because of their movements, the spiritual forces that animate the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies are divinities. When we're born on their specific day, that means that spirit sent us into the world to indicate to the community what deity governs the head. So the deity Awusi in Akan that governs the solar energy on Sunday on the masculine side. Someone is a Kwa, Awusi, or Kwa, Asi, or Kwasi, or Kwesi, a servant of the divinity Awusi. That's the divinity that governs the head of an Akan male, born on Sunday. Female is Esi and so forth. If you're born on Monday, Kwajo for males, and Ajua, the male and female forces that animate the moon and so forth. Kwabinan, Abinan Tuesday, operating through the planet Abina, which is so-called Mars and so forth. So in this chart, we show the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, the days of the week that they govern, the systems of the body that they govern, as well as their names in ancient Khanit and Kamit. And in our books and articles, we show that the exact same names and descriptive titles that they have in ancient Kemet can be found in the Akan language, same name, same title, same functions in creation. So, okay. So there was a question, is there a divinity that represents the energetic principle of air, Shu, similar to Neat and Mut, or Noon and Anet? So Shu and Tefnut are dealing with that expansive force. Shu and Tefnut, expansion and contraction. This is where, in reality, you get the whole yin and yang piece from. Now, in fact, these different divinities we're talking about, and let me just show this real quick, since somebody brought that up. Okay, so this is the page. And when you see our Kungwasuya page, this is a collage of the different flyers for the 38 courses we have taught so far. When you scroll, and for example, these are the 9 courses on Hoodoo, parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Some of them are 4-week courses, some of them are 6-week, based on our books, as well as information we haven't published yet. We're just finishing up the Achine Bois, Sacred Animal Totems of the Original Zodiac course. But when you look at the flyers, the original flyers, you'll see them, and then you'll see that they are 50% off. We did the 4-week course, Aperu, Hebrews Never Existed, showing that the Hebrews are fiction, a true historical fiction, and how they were manufactured, because some of our people try to identify with a fictional group, no different than trying to identify yourself with the elves at the North Pole serving Santa Claus. They didn't exist. So trying to trace your lineage back to a fictional group is absurd. So we show how they were manufactured in that course, but the same thing, when you look at the different courses, you'll see that they're all 50% off. So if they were, the 4-week courses were $20. So the archived courses are $10. The 6-week courses were $30 when they were live. The archived version of a 6-week course is 50% off. But once again, all 38 of these courses we're uploading to our Patreon account. So instead of purchasing one course for 15 and another one for 10 and another one for 10 and another one for 15, you can have access to all 38 courses for $7.77 per month, as well as everything else. So let me put the Hoodoo Cats page and the website. Okay, so it is 10 o'clock. So we're going to go ahead and end it here. Of course, if you have any questions on any of the information that we put forward, you can email us. You can reach out to us. Look out for the next episode of the Hoodoo Cast podcast. You can go check out the excerpts that we posted on YouTube, as well as go to our Patreon account. That first podcast was 3 hours because it was a podcast / conference where we, did what we normally do. So, but once again, Yedase, and we thank everybody so far, the patrons who have signed up for our Patreon account community so far, because you can go in and the first people who signed up for that, we appreciate that. That assists us in the work we're doing to be able to give away these free books, continue to do these classes, give discounts on trips to Kamit. Most people are charging, $4,000 to go to Kamit, $4,100, $4,200. We're charging $3,000, and we're going to the exact same sites, taking the exact same cruises, doing the exact same things. So, but us being able to offer, a few spaces for 50% off, that the way we're able to do that is when we have support from the community. So, okay, so Yedase, we thank you for tuning in. And Yabesha Bio, we will meet again. That's all. Oldest palette with showing him unifying the South and the North, and they had the 4 standards, and we saw the 4 people marked in front of him, and the pictures in there.
One of them, some of them have the standard and an animal on top, animal totem. But one of them had a circular structure on top. That was the royal placenta. The placenta was mummified and it was ritually taken care of. And we still do that because ritually, when somebody, baby is born, we would take the placenta, and I did that, and people we know in the culture did that, and take the placenta and bury the placenta. People know that name, they were mummifying the placenta. Spiritual energies connected to the placenta. And we bury it in the ground, it comes from the ground of the child, in the homestead and in the family and so forth. So we take the placenta and bury it. So even Khanit and Nubia, one of the titles is the placenta land. It's the origin of the land. Placenta, if you look at placenta and what it does, it surrounds the child, feeds the child while the child is in the womb, and it also removes waste from the bloodstream and so forth.
Hoodoo, the Akan term undu, meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life. Undu, to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication, divination. Cast, the Akan term guasi, to project, to throw, release. Cast, to form into a mold, to solidify. Hoodoo cast, to project our sacred mold of Akan ancestral religion in North America, the solidification of our identity, our ritual culture of medicine for healing and defense, our ritual culture of spirit communication for knowledge and application. Hoodoo cast, for the preservation of our people and the eradication of our enemies.